Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again, and I hope you had a wonderful day. I missed you last week, but I'm back this week and so eager and ready to share the second part of my story about my wonderful mother and the very tragic experience that she had, but how that God took all of that and turned it for the good. I must say about last week, I think that it left people with some sweet assurances and maybe others with some challenges. It was never my intention to bring about any any guilt or any bad feelings. However, I will say this, that I know it was the right time to share what I shared. And I will say this, that I have never shared that story publicly before, nor the rest of it, maybe a few bits and pieces. But, so I know it was raw, I know it was real, but that's me. So I thank you for all of your comments and what I believe that it meant to everyone. I will say this, it was straight from my heart, and there's no doubt about that. So, what prompted all this? 2 or 3 weeks ago, my friend Amy Costanza posted something on Facebook, and it showed a person with a tattoo, and it looked like just scribble writing. And someone said, what is that tattoo? What does that mean? And let me just read it to you. And when I read this, I was prompted, now is the time to share about your mom. My Aunt Tina, one of the healthiest and most amazing people I know, had an unexpected cardiac arrest, and according to doctors had died and was brought back to life 4 times by first responders before arriving to the hospital. She was put on a defibrillator, and after miraculously waking up, the first thing she did, unable to speak because she was intubated, the first thing she did was ask for a pen, and in my cousin's journal wrote, "It's real." The people in the room asked, "What's real? What is this? What's real?" And she responded by pointing up to heaven with tears in her eyes. She couldn't speak, but she knew it was real, and it was so powerful what she had experienced that she left that testimony to them. And the person was so touched by it, the niece or the nephew, that they got a tattoo in the same inscription that she wrote, "It's real." So when I read this, suddenly when my heart was prompted, I was nudged, it's time to share about your mom. So let's go ahead and get to the second half of this. Looking back, and we know that hindsight is always much, much better, but looking back, had I known how terminal she was, I would never have pushed her like I did. I pushed her in physical therapy. I pushed her to eat. I pushed her to drink. I pushed her to move her arm around and get up and move around. And I didn't realize how terminal she was. You see, I had been trained and taught that you believe God for healing no matter how impossible it looks. No matter what it looks like on the outside, you stand and you believe and you have faith. Well, looking back, that's all fine and good. However, the scripture said that a wise man knows the seasons. And had I known the season that she was in, I would have just backed up and just loved on her and given her anything she wanted and made her last and final part of her journey as wonderful as I could make it. But you see, I didn't understand the season. There's a scripture in Ecclesiastes 3, several scriptures. I'm going to read a few of them, because we need to understand seasons. That way we can make decisions according to the season. We can make decisions in wisdom according to the season that we're in. And a wise man knows the seasons. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to break down. It's okay to break down. I've broken down a few times. It's okay to break down. There is a time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A wise man understands these seasons. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. Oh, we thought all this prosperity preaching was just about get. No, there's a time to lose. And a wise man understands the seasons of getting and of losing. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. Just because we know something is true or the truth doesn't mean it's time to speak it. There's a time to speak and there's a time to refrain from speaking. So, in light of all of this, God was teaching me to understand and to comprehend the seasons. Now, you remember I said that, and all of this had been going on for a little over a year, and we had been taking care of Mom. We had not been out to preach anywhere. We hadn't ministered. We hadn't done anything to generate any income for over a year now. And God had spoken to me, and it was okay because He let me know He was deprogramming me. So I didn't know how we were going to live. Somehow we got by, but at the close of a little over a year of this going on, God spoke to my heart to do a conference. Now, before this, we did conferences all the time. We traveled all over doing conferences. And so it wasn't a new thing for me, but the new thing for me was that I had no capital. I had no money to put into a conference. To put on a conference, there's advertising, there's hotels, there's airfare, there's speakers, there's food, there's lots of other things. So I did have a credit card, and I don't advocate this, but for me, this was the thing I had to do. So I began to put everything on credit card. I got our brochures, got them mailed out. I just knew without a shadow of a doubt that God spoke to me to have a conference. So time came for the conference, and we were used to conferences of anywhere from 1,000 people to maybe 300 people. Occasionally less than that, but usually it was anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people. And we didn't have very many registrations. And when the conference time came, we had, I think, maybe 125 people come. Well, that wasn't a lot. We had rented a civic center, That was a major expense. And so in the midst of all of this, I just shut it out. I thought, no, God, you spoke to me. You're going to take care of it. I don't understand how, but it's going to happen. Now, I told you I was going to share about a financial miracle that happened. And let me just say this. If you and I will be obedient to the heavenly calling, if we will be obedient to what we see and hear in heaven and do it in the earth, if we will be obedient and faithful, I promise you that our God, our Creator, is going to take care of everything. So 125 people. It was never our practice to make big to-do over offerings. We did receive an offering of what people wanted to give, but we didn't play games with it, and we never manipulated people with it. So come the last day, one of our speakers says, I want to take the offering. I said, that's fine. I didn't really like to do that anyway. So she took the offering, and we didn't think anything of it. And at the end of the service, I went back to our volunteer workers and to check to see what the offering was. Of course, I wanted to know. And so I opened the door, and there were about 8 people in there that had been counting the offering. They were all weeping and crying. Some of them had their head down on the table. I thought, oh my God, this cannot be a good thing. And I walked in and I said, what's going on? Go ahead and tell me what's going on. And they said, Sue, you cannot believe that in a crowd of about 120 people with no big to-do and no games and no strings, the offering that came in was over $125,000 with another $20,000 or $30,000 in pledges. That, might I say, every one of them came in. There were no return checks. Every promise that was made came in. So that offering for that conference was above $150,000. Now, that's not a whole lot to these big television ministries and some other ministries, but to us, that was a whole lot, especially when we hadn't been ministering for over a year. And I couldn't believe, I could believe it because it was God, but I'm telling you, that was a miracle. And I'm telling you, God has miracles for you today. God has miracles when you think it's not going to work out. It's going to work out. So we had that financial miracle that catapulted us ahead. We were able to record 2 more CDs, and that brought our total at that time to 4 CDs that we had recorded. And we were just able to do so many things that we could never have thought of that we'd be able to do. But our God is faithful. So, after that miracle, we felt it was time to move back to Southeast Texas from Houston. And we got Mom and we brought her there. We put her on hospice. She required a nurse aide to come 3 times a week and take care of her, bathe her, and such as that. And I did her wound care every day. Frankly, I didn't trust the nurses to do it because I had seen too many mess up the wound care, and I knew how to do it, so it was my honor to do it, so I did it. So I had Mama in a hospital bed in my bedroom, and we'd been this way probably about maybe a month or so. And one day my heart was just, I was so touched by what God had done, and I was so overwhelmed and just so hungry to know more about God and to see God's face. And at that time it was a big thing among people that we were talking about seeing the face of God. And there was a song I was singing. My good friend Travis Goodwin sang it on one of our CDs, but it was "Show Me," excuse me, it was "Show me your face, Lord. Show me your face, and gird up my legs, I might stand in this holy place." I had my eyes shut and I was singing that song, and suddenly I opened my eyes and they fell across the room to my mom in her hospital bed. And as I stopped singing the song, I heard the voice of the Lord speak to me. And he said, "You have just seen my face." I'm looking at my mother, and he said, "You have just seen my face." You see, we make God so intangible and so out there, and we go searching and looking and all these pilgrimages and all sorts of things like that, when all the while he's right there in front of us. All the while, the scripture says that he is all in all. He is in everyone. He's in everyone that we meet. He's in everyone we see. He's in your children. He's in your mother and your father and your brother that you don't get along with. God is in that person because God breathed into each one of us and we became a living soul. And that breath of God resides within mankind. And so God spoke to me and he said, "You have just seen my face." And I was so taken by that. I was just overwhelmed because I was just looking for the face of God, never knowing that it was right there in the face of my mother. So I slowly, with all of this going on, I slowly began to understand the season that I was in. Mother had gotten to where she slept a lot and she didn't eat very much. I felt real guilty because I thought, oh my God, am I just starving? I can't starve my mother. So I would take her food in there and I would just beg her to eat, and she would just eat a little bitty bit and then she would go back to sleep. I was very concerned, and I remember when the charge nurse came and I expressed my concerns, and she said, "Sue, this is part of the process." You see, there's a process in everything. There's a process in living, and there is a process in dying. And we must understand the seasons. She said, "Don't worry about it. Your body knows what it needs. Your body knows what it needs to eat. Your body knows when it needs to sleep. Listen to your body." And that put me at such a peace with my mother, because I was at wit's end. I thought I was doing something wrong, but you see, she was terminal, and it was part of the process. And like I said, I began to understand the season. A time to be born and a time to die. And I began to surrender to that. I began to stop fighting. I began to stop, I'm going to stand tall in faith. And please, I'm not ridiculing that, but I'm saying and I don't know why I keep saying this, somebody needs to hear it. We need to understand the seasons. So I began to let go, and I just began to love on Mother, and more even than I had been. And I remember Easter came, and she always had gotten me an Easter basket, even though it was grown, but I didn't get her that because I knew she wouldn't eat it. So our neighbor that we lived by, they had just had some baby rabbits. And I went out and I got these little baby rabbits. I mean, they were just tall, this long. And I put them in an Easter basket, about 5 of them, and I brought them in to the bed. And Mama was laying there, and she was awake there. I said, Mama, I brought you an Easter present. And I put a blanket laying across her, and I got those little rabbits out, those little Easter bunnies, and I put them on her stomach. And she just looked down there, and her little hands, they began to pet those little babies. You see, it doesn't take a whole lot. Love doesn't cost a whole lot. Acts of love don't have a huge price tag. But she loved on those little bunnies. And I know that meant something to her. By this time she couldn't talk anymore, but she just smiled and smiled. And after a while, of course, I had to put them back and take them back to their mama. But I'll never forget the smile on her face with those little Easter bunnies. And then my next door neighbor had some beautiful blue hydrangeas, and I cut 3 of them. They were about this big. They were huge. And I put them in a vase, and I brought them in. I said, look, Mama, your favorite color blue. And I put them there. Those blue hydrangeas were just before her on her tray. And her face just lit up. It didn't take much. It didn't take much. If you have someone that you're caring for, and you feel like you're incapable of doing what needs to be done, let me assure you, it doesn't take a whole lot. Just give, and just love, and just be pure in your heart, and they will receive that act of love. Now, this is the thing, and I'm kind of toward the end here, but the last day that my mom was on this earth, we didn't know it was the last day, but that morning, the gentleman that played the keyboard, his wife called and she said, Sue, my kids have told me that they want to come over and sing to Granny Reed. Well, they hardly knew Granny Reed. I don't even know if they'd ever been around her very much. But suddenly they're telling their mama, Mama, we want to go sing to Granny Reed. Can you take us over there? We want to sing to her. Oh my God. Out of the mouth of babes. Those 2 little kids, they were probably 5 and 7. I don't know, maybe younger. And they came, they got to the house, they went straight to the room where Mama was, and they got to the bed, and one got on each side of her, and listened to the words they began to sing. They sang, come to the table, come break the bread, Jesus is calling, come and be fed. Those children were given an invitation from heaven. They were calling Mama home. I stood there in awe. Come to the table, come break the bread. Jesus is calling, come. and be fed. And as soon as they finished singing, they said, "Okay, Mom, we're ready to go." And they left. They weren't there 5 minutes. But I knew that I knew that I knew. And I called my sister in Houston and I said, "Wanda, you need to come because I think it's Mama's last day." And she came, and we gathered around the bed that night. We held Mama. We looked at her. She couldn't speak anymore. But what a gift to be able to have that time, that precious moment that our mom was going to leave this realm of earth. And so we looked at her, and her countenance literally began to shine like you would not believe. Her eyes began to twinkle like the stars in heaven. And we looked at her and we began to say, "Mama, you know it's okay. We're going to be fine. It's okay if you want to go be with Jesus." And she just smiled so big, and she began to, all she could do was nod her head, and smile, and her eyes were twinkling, and she was nodding her head, and I believe that she literally saw the face of God shining down upon her and calling her to go home. She was in total, absolute peace. And it was at that moment that she left this earth. And so I want to remind you of the story I read about the woman that wrote on a piece of paper and said, "It's real. It's real." And they said, "What's real?" And it was like I was looking at my mama's face, and I was thinking, I know, I can tell it's real by the way she's looking. And that woman just pointed up to heaven with tears in her eyes and said, "It's real. It's real." There is a realm beyond this realm that we walk in. And I want you to know that it is real. It is real. We experience dimensions of it even as we walk in this earth. We experience, that's why this is called spirit streams. We experience streams of the Spirit in this life. But there's a dimension beyond this life. And if you have a loved one, or if you yourself are facing a crossing over into the next dimension, I want to assure you it is real. And have peace and know that all is well. Our good friend Stephanie Gifford shared a few weeks ago about a near-death experience that she had. And if you would, go back and listen to it. It's on Spirit Quest. But so many have had those experiences. And I want you to know it's real, it's powerful. And I want you to hear the words, "Come to the table. Come break the bread. Jesus is calling. Come and be fed." And if it's time to release a loved one, release them. Understand the season and know that all is well, and know that you've done everything you could do. So in all of this story, I want you to realize how that through my mother's tragedy, through her being burned, through her being taken as an offering unto God, I was set free. And that began my journey. It didn't all happen at once, but that began my journey of being free from religion and from the dogma and the bondages of men that I had been walking in most of my adult life. So I want to thank you, Mama. Thank you for being faithful and for being that sacrifice. And I want to thank you out there. Thank you for listening to my story. It's real. It is real. And I want to bid you good night with that. I want you to lay down in peace tonight and sleep and know that you know that you know that it's real. Good night, everybody.